And today we will be discussing the second session of the Bhagavad Gita, key verses. So in the first session, I started with 1.1, where I focused primarily on the context of the Gita and how is it relevant today. It addresses the enduring questions of what is the right thing to do, what are we meant to do in life. And with that background, today we'll move to a fundamental teaching of the Gita. That will be the one of the key verses. This will be 2.13. I've prepared a list of around 51 topics that we'll be discussing, which we'll share shortly after the class in the group. So each session will be based on one particular question whose answer we will be seeking. And I'm also doing a screen share over here, and I also be sending in a PowerPoint on the WhatsApp, which you can use. So broadly, we will be discussing today on 2.13 in the Bhagavad Gita. That is, Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptir dhirastatra namuhyati. So this talks about identity. Dehinosmin yatha dehe. Krishna says inside the body, in Dehino, there is the embodied. There is the one to whom the body belongs. Kaumaram Yavanam Jara, and that embodied being goes through various bodily stages like childhood, youth, and old age. Kaumaram Yavanam Jara tatha dehantara praptir, and thereafter there is deha antar. One goes beyond this body to another body. Dhiras tatra namuhyati. One is not bewildered. The wise person who knows this is not bewildered by such a change. So broadly, I'll talk this in three terms. So I'm sharing my screen here. I'll be discussing broadly 3 points here. The need for spirituality, the rationale for spirituality, and the result of spirituality. So this verse talks about, by spirituality I mean not just a vague sense of feeling good. What different people think about spirituality and what it is, this will be discussed more in a later session. But here the emphasis will be that there is a spiritual side to us. There is a non-material core, the soul, which is the actual person, which is actually who we are. So why does one even need to explore whether there's some non-material side to it? And then if the Bhagavad Gita says there is, well, what is, can we as rational people accept it? And if somebody accepts it, what is the result of it? How can we know whether it is true or not? So let's begin. Here we have, firstly, just as our body needs physical nutrition, we also need metaphysical orientation. By metaphysical orientation, essentially what I mean is, we all need a sense of place and purpose, which is intrinsically tied with our identity. So, for example, right now, say I am situated at a particular place. That is, say I am seated in Mumbai, and I have a particular purpose. So I identify myself. So I'm trying to share the Bhagavad Gita's wisdom. So our identity basically is associated with a particular place and a particular purpose. Say, some of you may be software engineers, some of you may be in India, some of you may be in America, wherever, in different parts of the world. But basically, our identity orients us in life. That means that who we are shapes what we are meant to do. And we saw Arjuna basically had a confusion based on inability to understand what is to be done and what is not to be done. So his complexity, his perplexity was that, what should I do? So when I say place and purpose, this can be at various levels of abstraction. So somebody might say that, okay, they might say, what if you ask them, they want to orient themselves. So it's like if you are in an ocean and we are navigating, we need orientation. Okay, this is the direction I'm going. So we all are at a particular place and are going for a particular purpose. So an orientation might be that, okay, I am a software engineer and I'm driving to office. That's one orientation. But beyond that, we could have another orientation, which is that, I'm a young man or a young woman and I'm trying to grow in my career. Another orientation could be that I am, say, an Indian working to make a living in America, working to have greater prospects in America. I'm an American working to do certain things. So when we talk about our location, we could say that I'm a mother, I'm a husband, I'm a son or a daughter, and then I'm taking care of my family. I'm earning money to take care of my family, whatever. So our sense of place and purpose, they orient us. And this orientation is extremely important. Just as, say, if one day we woke up and we just didn't know, we found we were in a completely unfamiliar place. And hey, where am I? And how did I get here? What am I to do? So even if we are at an unfamiliar place, then at least, I have to go back home. I was supposed to go to work. Will I reach there in time? So when somebody is kidnapped, they are taken to an unfamiliar place. But imagine if somebody is simultaneously kidnapped and say hit on the head, because of which they get amnesia. Then they don't know where they are, they don't have a sense of place, and they don't even have a sense of purpose. Hey, what am I to do? At least we could say if somebody gets amnesia and knows they got amnesia, they will have a sense of purpose that, okay, I want to find out who I am. That is also a sense of purpose. But if we don't have a sense of place and purpose, then we can't orient ourselves in life. Life can become extremely disorienting. When we join a company or any big institution, often there are orientation courses. So orientation courses basically are meant to introduce us to our place and purpose within the big picture. So what the company is, what the vision is, all that is told. But basically their idea is, by that you understand where you are and what you can do or what you are meant to do, how you can grow. So we need a metaphysical orientation. Now, why am I using the word metaphysical orientation? Because our sense of place and purpose can be increasingly abstract. So if I say right now at a physical level, somebody might say that, okay, I am a software engineer, I'm driving to my office. So that's very physical. But if somebody says that, okay, I'm an Indian trying to live the American dream. Now, Indian itself is an abstraction. Its abstraction means the concept of a nation there are geographical boundaries to a territory, but the concept of identifying with a nation is a conceptual construct. And similarly, living the American dream, that's a concept. So, we have various orienters in our life. Let's suppose somebody lives in an island, and that's where their family is, their social circle is, their whole life is over there in that island. And they fly out for some business work, and when they are gone, say tsunami comes and the whole island is reduced to water. And then suddenly they will have no place and purpose. Not only their home is gone, but their whole purpose of life was associated with their family, with their friends, with the social circle, it's all gone. So we can't even imagine what kind of distress and disorientation can cause. Often if there's physical devastation, then that causes problems. But if there is disorientation, suppose somebody has grown up to be an athlete and they get an injury which makes athletics impossible for them, then it's not so much the pain of the injury, it is the disorientation that is caused, that is a big problem. What am I to do? They always identify themselves as athletes, and now who are they? So this often is a problem for say athletes who become celebrities and then they retire. Unless they can reorient themselves, maybe become a sports commentator or a sports coach or something like that, then it is a very scary thing to live thinking that the best part of my life is behind me. And now what I can do is basically a shadow role or something like that of what I was. So unless they reorient themselves, they can become emotional wrecks. So sometimes we don't realize, the whole point is we all need metaphysical orientation, but we don't realize how important it is. It's only when we are disoriented, that's the time the question comes up. So the Bhagavad Gita begins with Arjuna completely disoriented. And it is our spirituality which gives us a lasting orientation. It gives us an orientation that won't be stolen from us. We might be a software, as I said, somebody might be an athlete, but that orientation can be lost if they get an injury. That orientation can be lost by so many other catastrophes. They might be dropped from the team and they might be banned from the sport. The sport itself might become unpopular and will become economically unviable. So whatever, we all have certain orienters in our life, and these orienters can be taken away from us at any moment. And in the case of Arjuna, the orienters were not so much taken away as two orienters pointed him in two different directions. His Kula Dharma pointed him in one direction, his Kshatriya Dharma in another direction. So when this happened, when the orienters were pointing him in opposite directions, he just didn't know what to do. And when he didn't know what to do, that is the time when the Bhagavad Gita provided him metaphysical orientation. So this is a verse that is orienting Arjuna again. And it is our sense of identity gives us a sense of place and purpose. So what is the place? Krishna is telling Arjuna, you are a soul inside a body. And the purpose will be mentioned in the next verses. Purpose is ultimately spiritual evolution, is spiritual growth. It's ultimately liberation. So there is place and purpose. And this place and purpose can never be lost. Because we as souls are always going to be souls. We might tomorrow not be having our same professional designations. We might not have our national designations. We might not have our family designations. There are various identities we have. So we have functional identities. So our family, our nationality, in today's age of even gender transplant surgeries and things like that happening on gender, may not be a permanent identity. But there are these functional identities we have, and below all these we have a fundamental identity. And that fundamental identity is that we are souls. And the soul is on a journey. The details of the journey will come later in the Bhagavad Gita, but the soul is a journey of evolution, of spiritual evolution. So this is the first point. So Krishna speaks this philosophical concept of the soul primarily to serve Arjuna's need of disorientation. To reorient him, Krishna reminds him of his fundamental identity. And the idea with this is that without being oriented properly, we won't be able to function at all. So when Arjuna is not able to function, the start of this verse described how Arjuna has become paralyzed. He just puts aside his bow saying, I can't fight. He says, I'm undecided. न चैतद विद्मः कतरन्नो गरियो यद्वा जयेम यदिवानो जयेयु यानेव हत्वा न जिजीविषामस्तेव सतः प्रमुखे धार्तराष्ट्रः. So I don't know whether I should fight. I don't know whether fighting, winning is better, or losing, letting my relatives live is better. I'm confused, and that's how Krishna gives this reorientation. So this is the first point. So as I said, the PowerPoint will be discussing 3 points. So the second point is the need for is the rationale for spirituality. So in the rationale, I will talk about 3 things. We talk about some evidences based on consciousness, past life memories, and near-death experiences. So this is what we're going to discuss as far as the need for spirituality is concerned. So there are the scientific pointers to this are primarily the form of near-death experiences, past life memories, and there are the characteristics of the soul. So let's look at it simply first from the point of view of inference. To think of ourselves as our bodies is obvious because we identify ourselves with our bodies. That's what we physically see. That's what when the body has pain, when the body is injured, we feel pain. So to identify ourselves as physical creatures is an obvious identification. But there are certain characteristics that we exhibit that cannot be explained if we are simply biological machines or biological robots, if we are just our bodies. So what are these characteristics? These 3 are the defining characteristics of the soul. That is Sat, Chit, Ananda. These are the Sat, Chit, Ananda is Sat is eternity, existence, but enduring existence. Chit is consciousness, which leads to the faculty of knowledge. And Ananda is joyfulness, which makes us also seek joy. So basically these 3 things, Sat, that these 3, you could say these 3 things, they characterize our overall behavior. See, we want to live forever. We want to know more and more, and we ultimately seek joy. If we consider these characteristics as compared to what, from a biological perspective, is the function or the functions of our body, if we consider from a physical evolutionary perspective, Darwin talked about survival of the fittest. So basically we human beings live primarily, basically we are survival and reproduction machines. That's the idea which biology gives us. Now survival basically and reproduction, these 2 involve, from the dharmic perspective, we call these as eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So eating, sleeping, and defending, these are all for survival, and mating is for reproduction. So basically we live we at a biological level, if we are simply biological creatures, then these would be our driving influences. And yet we live for more than this. We don't just live for these things. Certainly we live, we want food, we want, we need to rest ourselves, we look for partners, and if there's a danger, we defend ourselves. But while these are drives which are defined by our body, these are not the drives that define our entire being. So let's consider Sat. Now survival is something else. We all want to survive. But Sat refers to enduring existence. Now why is it that we want to live forever? Nothing in nature survives forever. And our longing to live forever, if we look at it around in nature, if we were simply biological creatures programmed by our environment to respond and adapt to stimuli, then nothing in an environment lives forever. Even the huge mountains, the Rockies, the Himalayas, nothing is eternal. The Twin Towers, when it collapsed, it because it was a magnificent edifice, it had that illusion of permanence. And when it collapsed, it caused a permanent permanent scar on the Western psyche. It burst the bubble of comfort and security that had been built. But the point is that even that is not eternal. So if nothing around us lasts forever, where does our longing to live forever come from? It doesn't come from anything physical. Might it be coming from something non-physical? Might it come from the spiritual core of who we are? So this longing is as unusual as, say, a child in a remote African tribe, completely unconnected with the world. The child suddenly one day says to his mom, I want a pizza. And the mother asks, where did you hear about pizza from? So there's nothing if nothing in the surroundings of the child tells us about a pizza, then naturally the question will come up, where did you hear about a pizza from? So that's the question of Sat. So we seek enduring existence. Could this point to our eternality? Now Chit is consciousness. Now to be conscious is to be curious. To be conscious is to be desirous. We want to know about things. Now desirous can mean many things. But again, if we consider humanity's search for knowledge, even scientific knowledge, we want to know many things just for the sake of knowing them. It is not just for the sake of, because that knowledge will be useful for us. When Newton saw the apple falling, and when he was sitting under an apple tree, as the story goes, then Newton, either the apple fell in front of him or the apple fell on him. And he could just have picked up the apple and ate and gone away. And that would have been the biologically expected thing to do. We need food. Food has come on its own to us. Let's eat it. But it was this curiosity. Okay, what made this apple fall? That started the engine that is modern science. That led to the development of gravity. Well, it's his impressive intelligence that he came up with the gravity from such a simple observation. But simultaneously, it points to the reality that we humans are curious. And we are curious for things more than simply survival. What are needed for our survival, for our reproduction. So why do we have this curiosity at all? And especially we humans come up with art, music, literature, philosophy. And why do we seek this? If you consider many of the abstract subjects that we study, it's only later that their concrete use comes up. But we get a joy in that. Animals don't seek metaphysical knowledge. They just exist. So this curiosity is something that is quite distinctive. And then there is joy. We all seek joy. And in fact, we could say at one level, pleasure is the purpose of our life. But at another level, we could ask that actually, if we were simply creatures designed for survival, then the search for pleasure is often the greatest threat to survival. Say, a fish is caught by a bait. Mouse is caught by some cheese in a cage. And both of them go there because they think, hey, this is enjoyable. So, and often we get caught for play. Now, we could at least say that the animals have excuses that whatever tempts and traps them, it looks like food for them. But we humans don't even have that excuse. So cigarette doesn't look like food to anyone. Drugs or alcohol doesn't look like food to anyone. And yet we get attracted to it. And then we get trapped. So in many ways we could say that in some areas when we look for food, that's fine. But in many areas the search for pleasure is often the cause of the greatest trouble. It gets us into trouble. And why do we so desperately long for joy, even at the cost of risking our own life for the sake of that joy? If, as now there is the fantasy of making robots which could simulate the actions that humans do. Science fiction might talk about robots being conscious, but it's first of all very difficult to do that. And where consciousness comes from is itself an unanswered question. And so that's why how to generate it is also very difficult to do. But emotions, especially the search for pleasure, is what comes in our way. And this is called in philosophy and in science as the hard problem of consciousness. That we could do everything that we did without any emotions. And in many cases, we might be able to do it better. Because emotions, we want pleasant emotions, but often we get unpleasant emotions. So emotions sometimes obstruct our perception. Emotions sometimes get in our way of doing things properly. So we could very well do without emotions. So why do we at all have emotions? Where do they come from? Now, brain science, all that we have found is that they correlate. But there is no one point where our consciousness originates in the brain. There's no one part. We experience consciousness as an integrated experience. If a bird flies in front of us, there are different parts of the brain which see the color of the bird, another which see the shape of the bird, another which hear the sound of the bird, another which sees the motion of the bird. But we get it all as an integrated experience. So it's not like out of sync video where you see the motion first and hear the sound later. No, it comes as synchronized. So if it was simply the brain that we're experiencing, then there is no one part of the brain which is connected to all other parts of the brain which would integrate all that the brain is processing and give us an integrated experience. So basically, our sense of selfhood, it's one unitary locale of consciousness. We identify ourselves as one consciousness who is perceiving things as an integrated experience. So biologically, this is almost impossible to explain. So this very existence of consciousness with its characteristics of enduring existence, of curiosity, and of pleasure seeking, these point to something non-physical within us. And this is itself, of course, intuitive. So there are a couple of other things we'll discuss about the rationale for spirituality, that there are scientific pointers. Primary among them are near-death experiences and past life memories. In near-death experiences, there are cases of people. I have written a book on demystifying reincarnation, and I've given many cases in that. So there are cases where people have actually lost consciousness, especially say there's a case where a patient had a brain aneurysm, and they had to do a operation called Operation Standstill, where basically the person was given an artificial heart attack, and then all the blood was drained from their body. The brain was made completely, brain waves became completely flat, and then the brain is taken out from the cranial cavity, and then the doctor reaches below to the aneurysm and removes the aneurysm. Now at that time there are loud sound beats like a tea kettle or a train whistle at a much higher frequency going on in the ears, because even the slightest presence of consciousness at that time can cause the patient, can cause havoc If the patient feels any pain and reacts and shakes or whatever, so the patient has to be absolutely unconscious. And by all known parameters, the patient is unconscious. And still, Dr. Spengler, who pioneered this surgery called Operation Standstill, that the body is brought to a standstill. He reports of cases where patients have remembered and seen, hey, what happened? They remember, so this lady who had the aneurysm, she saw herself from a perspective above her body. So she saw herself lying on the operation theatre and she saw herself from above, and first thing she noticed is, hey, what's happened with my hair? Why is it cut like this? And then she noticed that it was supposed to be a brain surgery, but somebody was doing something with her thigh area. So they were basically preparing for the bypass for inducing a heart attack to get the heart to stop functioning. And she remembered the conversation between the patients, between the medical staff, and biologically it is impossible. And near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences are not as uncommon as some people might think. They are quite well documented. And basically they raise the question, how can we be conscious when we are not conscious? How can we be conscious when we are not conscious? Means when our brain is unconscious. So the most reasonable explanation for this is that the body is here, the source of consciousness, which the Bhagavad Gita says is the soul, is here. And normally the soul functions, its consciousness is rooted through the body. But during certain traumatic events or during some disorienting events, the soul and the body may temporarily separate. And whereas some people presume that the brain is the generator of consciousness, but the brain could well be the transmitter of consciousness. And not only a transmitter of consciousness, the brain could even be the reducer of consciousness. Reducer means that the soul itself has pure broad consciousness, but if the soul's consciousness comes through the body, then you can see only what is seen through the body. You cannot perceive any other things. So basically it becomes like somebody is say in a dungeon with only some windows. That person can perceive a lot, but they can perceive only through what the windows are showing. So for the soul, the various senses are like windows. And there are cases there's a whole book called Mindsight, where there are people with out-of-body and near-death experiences. And there's a whole book about people who were blind. So normally they couldn't see anything. They couldn't even see themselves. The only time they could see was when they had out-of-body experiences. Near-death and out-of-body. So near-death experiences basically when somebody is near-death and they have certain experiences. Out-of-body is when within the near-death experiences they see themselves from a perspective outside the body. So that is the only time they could see. So the most reasonable explanation is that when the soul's consciousness gets rooted through the body, then if the body as a biological machine is damaged in some way, then the person can't have consciousness. But the person can't say if the optic nerve is damaged or the eye is damaged, the person can't see. But if the soul comes out of the body, then that particular damage of the sensory pathway doesn't impede the soul anymore, and the person can see. So out-of-body experience is one evidence. Then there is there is also past life memories, and this is a fascinating field where children of 3, 4, 5 suddenly say to their parents, "Mom, where is my other mom?" And the parents are taken aback, but the child starts giving specific details. I stay here, I do this, I go there, and I want to go and meet my family over there. And it's not just recollections. There is a 4-level thing. There are recollections, then there are recognitions. When the child is taken to that place, they recognize the people over there from the previous family. They recognize the places, the objects. And it's not only recognitions, but beyond that, there is also behaviors. The child doesn't behave like a child from this family. Child behaves as if they belong to that family. And then there is also birthmarks and birth defects. And birthmarks and birth defects means that says the child had some fatal injury in a previous life, and they get a birthmark corresponding to that injury. So I have described in my book the case of Necip Unlu, who was in Turkey, and as a small boy he started telling that I live in another place called Mersin, and I have a family over there. So Necip, he as a small child would basically start saying that I want to go over there. And when he went over there, at that time, he said that he initially his parents were confused because he said that I'm Necip, but his name he said, but I'm Necip Budak. And they said, no, you're Necip Unlu. So then there was a confusion. His name in his previous life was the same. Necip is a common name in Turkey. But when he went there, what happened was he had never been to that town, but he went straight. He took his parents, he took his relatives who had taken him there, straight to a particular house. And there, in that house, he basically talked with them, and he recognized there was a widow who was staying there. And as soon as he saw this widow, she said that she had been married to a man named Necip Budak, and he not only recognized her, he recognized the picture of his children, but he also told things which nobody could have known. This Necip in his previous life was a violent person who also would take alcohol. So once, under the spell of alcohol and anger, he had attacked his wife, and she had dodged the blow, but the knife had grazed against her inner thigh, and she had a scar over there. So then one of the Antonia Mills was the researcher who did all this research. So Dr. Jan Stevenson was also a prominent past life researcher. So these past life researchers, so one of the ladies, she had this woman examined. They found that she had a scar exactly where Necip had said, and it was, she said, yes, my ex-husband had attacked me. That's how I got this. Now, how could a small 6-year-old child living in a city somewhere else, who has never met a woman, know something about a scar on a private part of a woman's body? So there's practically no logical explanation if we consider from a material perspective. And not only that, it is not only just recognitions but also behaviors. His widow, she had remarried, and when Necip saw her photo with another man, he was a small 6-year-old boy, got so angry. He said that, no, you are my wife, you're not anyone else's wife. And he wanted to take the picture and tear it apart. And now his kids from the previous life were older than him almost. And yet he was fondling their hair and smelling their hair and treating them like a father would treat the children. So the behavior was remarkable. And most significantly, Necip had multiple birthmarks. And whenever he would talk about his past life, he would point to the birthmarks on various parts of his body, and he would say, this was where I was stabbed. And that was what precisely had happened to Necip previously, that Necip had got into a drunken fight with someone, and the other person had taken out a knife and stabbed him at multiple places. And because it had been a murder case, so there was a police report, post-mortem had been done, and the past life researchers got access to the post-mortem report, and they found that Necip had 6 birthmarks which corresponded with the fatal wounds from his previous life. So now, how precise was the correlation of the location? Say if you say somebody has a wound on the arm, say upper arm. Now upper arm, you can have so many places on the upper arm. So the past life researchers divided the human body into a grid of 128, say XY coordinates. So this is one coordinate, say maybe 2 on top and maybe 10 on the right, if you consider the full body's expanse, like that. And they divided the whole body into 128 coordinate system, and they located, and they found that this precise correlation for 6 birthmarks. So the probability of that working out by chance is 1 by 128 raised to the power of 6. It's extremely low probability. So past life memories also point very strongly to the idea that if we consider the previous life to be one circle, this is one circle, the new life is another circle, then what is the intersection point between the two? The only reasonable intersection point is at a physical level, that body has died and this body is available alive somewhere else. So what is the correlation? The only correlation would be a soul, who is something non-material which has inhabited this body and gone to that body. So what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that the soul changes bodies. That's what is demonstrated in past life memories. Now, if we consider, so this was the rationale for spirituality. Each of these, there are many more cases available, and there's much more reasoning that could be done for it. But for our purposes, this will suffice. And now we'll go to the last part, and then we can have some questions, just briefly. So what are the result of spirituality? So if you have to consider, okay, if the spiritual stuff is real, then what will happen? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that we will become calm. We will not be disturbed by life's ups and downs. Tam stitikshasva bharata. So result of that identity will be tolerance, will be calmness. How will that result? See, generally, as I said, we all need certain orienters in life. So if, say, we are talking with someone and that person just yells or behaves in a strange way, then what happened? We'll be a little taken aback. But if we know that in advance, that say that if it's just an ordinary conversation between two people, we'll be taken aback. But say if we are a mental health care provider and we are talking with people who are mental health care inmates, then we know that the mentally disturbed people, and we expect the unexpected over there. So basically, whenever we are oriented properly, then it moderates our expectation. So if we know this road has very high traffic, then we can go. We will not get so disturbed if we are not able to move faster. So like that, what spirituality does is that it gives us a sense of orientation that doesn't depend on our external material things. So if I think I am the body and bodily pleasure is the goal of my life, then anything that interferes with my bodily pleasure, that will seem extremely disorienting. But if I have a higher purpose, then disorientation of bodily pleasure won't trouble me that much. Interruption in bodily pleasure rather. So Krishna says, if we nourish ourselves spiritually, if we are oriented spiritually properly, we will become calmer. We will not be disturbed by life's ups and downs, such as pleasure or pain, such as heat or cold. Matra sparshastu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkadaha agam apayino nityastam stitikshasva bharata. When we learn to tolerate them. And then this 214 talks about tolerance, 215 talks about transcendence. That we will eventually transcend life's ups and downs and we will attain life eternal. We will attain liberation. So what liberation is? That will be discussed in the Bhagavad Gita in a later session. But I'll summarize what I spoke today. Today we discussed about 213 in the Bhagavad Gita. And the question was, who are we really? So I talked about this question, who am I, is our orienter in life's complexity. And our sense of identity gives us a sense of place and purpose. So, and we have this orientation of place and purpose at various levels of abstraction. It could be a particular physical location where we are going from that physical location to another location. It could be we are in a country, we are in a company at a particular hierarchy, we are in a particular family at a particular level. So if we are disoriented, then we can't function. So just as the body needs physical nutrition, our core, we also need metaphysical orientation in our life. And then I talk about how Arjuna disoriented, and Krishna told him that you are a spiritual being and you are on a journey of spiritual evolution. That was the orientation that will not be disturbed by anything, any of the ups and downs of life. And then I talked about what is the rationale for spirituality. At a bodily level, we will have the drives for reproduction, for survival, which involves food, rest, and self-defense. But we human beings, especially, we long for enduring existence. We long for knowledge. We have innate curiosity, and we long for pleasure. And in some cases, these three longings go along with the bodily drives, but sometimes they diverge. And when they diverge, then the question arises, why are these present at all? Now that is explainable best by considering that there is a non-material core to us. And that's why we have these longings. And then I talked about cases of past life memories as well as near-death experiences. With respect to consciousness also, I talked about how consciousness is a mystery, that we have the binding problem, that we experience consciousness as one integrated experience, not inputs coming from the eyes and the ears to discrete parts of the brain, but we have integrated experience. So where is the integrator in the brain? That's not actually in the brain. It is using the brain to get the information, and the integration is happening at a non-material level and the soul experiences it. Beyond this, I talked about the result of spiritual practices, that we will grow spiritually and then we will not be so disturbed by the things that disorient us in daily life. Thank you very much. We have some questions which I'll take. So even after practicing spiritual life, why are we still confused? So basically, life is confusing. It's not so much of 1 or 0. It's like a gradual progression. Instead of thinking of spiritual advancement as digital, we need to see it as analog, as incremental. So suppose there's a firefighter who has a knowledge of how to put out fires. But say even after all the theoretical training, the first time a firefighter sees fire, they may panic. And instead of fighting the fire, they just drop the fire hose and or get petrified. But if a firefighter is more trained, the more experienced, then what happens? Even when that particular issue comes up, so they see a big fire, even an experienced firefighter might panic for a few moments, but then they come back on the right track fast. Okay, it's a big fire, but let's attack it from here. Let's do this. So training basically means that the intelligence becomes faster than the mind. That our trained instincts come upon us faster. And that's how we move forward in our life. So each of us needs this training, and that's why we need to be patient with ourselves. That yes, rather than thinking that I'm committing the mistakes, as soon as we realize, okay, I'm going on the wrong track, then come on the right track. So as soon as we realize I'm panicking, like a firefighter realizes, okay, no need to panic, let me do this. I know what to do in this case. Just start doing the right thing and gradually it will increase. So we need knowledge as a map, but then after we have the map, we also need to learn to drive. So the two are having a map and learning to drive are two different things. So jnana is getting the map. Buddhi is learning to drive. So buddhi takes time and we need to keep driving. And in one sense, driving is basically the vehicle will tend to go off track and we tend to keep getting it back on track. And Krishna said this is the way it is expected to be. The mind wanders, refocus. The mind wanders, refocus. The essence of commitment is recommitment. That it's not that once we commit and that's how we will be for the rest of our lives. We'll go off track, we recommit. We go off track, we recommit. That's how we all grow. So that's one question. Now, knowing that So how do we realize that we are souls? It happens gradually, when sometimes at a physical level there could be extreme pain, but we absorb ourselves in the holy name, in spiritual sound vibration, and say, we realize, okay, this is, I'm experiencing, if I were the body, I should be experiencing pain, but I'm experiencing something different. But I'm not experiencing pain. I'm still having some relief. I'm still having some peace. Where is that coming from? So when we have certain bodily experiences, but our experiences are different from the body's experiences, that is a good example of times when we can realize that our identity expands beyond the body. Say, it could also be that the body, at a bodily level, we are enjoying some immense pleasure, but we still, I'm not happy. We might be eating something, it's delicious, we long for it, but when we eat it, hey, this is not all great as it is touted to be. What's going on? So we can look at times when we have experiences that are not explainable only in terms of physical terms, and they point to the reality of the soul. And over a period of time, right now we are sleeping, and that's why we can't perceive directly. But just like, say, a baby is sleeping and the baby can't perceive her mother, but if say the baby is cold and the mother puts a comforter on the baby, now the baby's eyes are closed, but when the baby feels the comforter, the baby infers from that feeling, oh, my mother is here, my mother has put this comforter on me. And that's how the baby understands. So similarly, when we expose ourselves to spiritual stimuli, when we say go to a temple, when we chant the holy names, when we recite verses, and we experience some non-material relief, some non-material joy, so we infer from that, hey, this is, although I can't see this whole spiritual business because I'm asleep, but I can experience this. Pratyaksha vagamam dharmam, Krishna says, that it is directly experienced by practice of devotional service. Now the next question is, why can't we remember our past lives? Multiple reasons. First is that each life is a journey, is a new phase in a journey. And the normal system is, if you see how our memory functions, most of our memory is situational. Say right now I'm talking with you, so the things I remember are primarily associated with what I need for talking with you. If we started remembering everything which we know at any particular moment, we would be overwhelmed. So if we started remembering all of our past, then we would not be able to function. We would live in a perpetual flashback mode. And say even we might have lived for some time in our childhood in a particular place, but we may remember it very vaguely. But if we go to that place, we may remember it more. So much of our memory is situational. And so when we are out of that situation, we don't remember it that much. So when the soul leaves one body and goes to another body, because most of the memory of the soul is situational, that memory is lost. And that's the normal way we function. But then rather than asking why we can't remember, we understand that memory is situational and forgetting is natural. It's not only natural, it's essential. Otherwise, we would have so much cognitive overload that we wouldn't be able to function. So, why do some people remember? That would be a more appropriate question to ask. And usually the reason is, most people who remember is they have had some kind of abrupt or especially agonizing death. For the soul, when the soul leaves the body, the soul needs some time to process. But if the soul can't process it, just like say if you're in America and you come to India, then there is a jet lag. The body's biological clock is in India, but the body is in America, but the physical location is in India. The body still keeps functioning according to the previous time zone. So similarly, we could say for some people there is a transmigration lag. And this usually happens if somebody dies by being murdered. There's a sudden death, and then the soul is not able to process the event of death. And because of that, the soul has gone from this body to next body, but psychologically or in terms of emotions, the consciousness is lagging it than the previous body. And most of these children, when they go to they go to the people from their previous life, they meet them, talk with them, and then after that they get a sense of closure. And then they may still stay connected with the family from the previous life, but that emotional intensity that is there in the memory, that is no longer there. So basically, death is meant to be a closure, but if there is no closure at that time, then some people, as an exception, remember their past lives. And especially going to this point that if the physical birthmarks are there, how do the birthmarks come about? That's also related to that. Sometimes the sudden sense, oh, I was shot, I was stabbed, that creates such a mark on the psyche of a person that they keep thinking about it, and the soul goes into a new body. Also, the soul thinks about it, and that's how that mark gets imprinted on it's basically a psychosomatic mark. From the mind it comes to the body. So the physical wound gets impressed on the psyche, on the mind, and then that mind along with the soul goes to the next body. And the mind, because of thinking with shock, horror, compulsiveness, a perverse compulsiveness, then that gets imprinted on the body. Now, so if human life is so rare, okay, I'll just have one or two questions and the remaining we can answer privately. If human life is so rare, why is it still so difficult to find the purpose of life? Yeah, that's because in today's world especially, we have gone far away from orienting ourselves properly. We have got lots of distractions. The material world is a place of forgetfulness, and much of technological advancement is where we can have more and more avenues for forgetting life's ultimate purpose. So naturally the purpose of life becomes difficult. But if somebody seeks it genuinely, that if I really want to know what life is meant for, if we maintain that question, eventually we will be guided. It may take time for us to get the answers. It may take time for us to accept the answers. But if we keep searching, surely the answers will come upon us. It's just we need patience. Yeah, I mentioned about the fatal marks. How do they come on last body? If Krishna wants us to take up a new body and live a new life, why do people have past life recollection? I mentioned that it's because of the closure has not happened. Okay, so one last question, and then okay, does the soul go into another body at death? Well, 213 doesn't say this. 222 later says that it gives the example of how we give up clothes and take up new clothes when the first clothes become old. Like that, we give up the body and take up the new body. Now, where does the soul go as per karma, and what is the concept of ghosts? Ghosts I'll explain a little later in detail. I have a PowerPoint on ghosts also. But basically, the soul does some karma in this life, and the soul can go through different levels. The soul can go to lower levels of existence, which is what we would call as heaven or hell. It can go to lower species. The soul can also go to animal species and live over there. Or the soul can come back in the earth itself at a human level and endure some karma. So depending on, the body is basically like a dress for the soul. And depending on the kind of karma that the soul has done, the karma we could say like the budget, how much money the soul has earned. So when one dress gets torn for us, we buy a new dress. What determines the new dress that we'll buy? It depends on basically what we like and how much we can pay for. So similarly, the soul gets a new body based on its karma, whether it will be a human body, a non-human body, or a non-earthly body at another level of existence. Now, ghosts are extreme cases where the soul loses one body but doesn't have the karma to get a next body. So then the ghosts are basically disembodied beings. We'll talk about ghosts more in a future session. So remaining questions I will answer on the WhatsApp. I will answer and you'll get the links in the WhatsApp group. Thank you very much for your attention and participation. Hare Krishna.